Hey everyone, and welcome back to Brian's Horror Movies for Life, and welcome to this Jaws Orca franchise review video as part of my current series for June here. So in this video, we're going to take a look at the final movie in this series, and that is not a Jaws movie, but the other, which is Orca the Killer Whale from 1977, which I have on from Scream Factory on Blu-ray here. So yeah, Orca the Killer Whale. I remember watching this growing up as a kid once or twice, but I probably haven't seen it in about 30 years at least, maybe even longer. So I was interested in checking this out. I got this on Blu-ray a while ago, but I haven't watched it till now for this series. So let's go ahead and talk about Orca the Killer Whale from 1977. So, Orca, also known as Orca the Killer Whale, that's what I call it, is a 1977 thriller film directed by Michael Anderson from a screenplay by Luciano Vincenzoni and Sergio Donati, based on a novel by Arthur Herzog. The film follows a male orca tracking down and getting revenge on a fishing boat and its captain for unintentionally killing the whale's pregnant mate and their unborn calf. Executive producer Dino De Laurentiis commissioned the project to cash in on the blockbuster success of Jaws. Filming took place in Newfoundland and Labrador and Malta, with many of the orca scenes shot at the Marine Land in the Pacific and the Marine World theme parks. So the film opens with Captain Nolan, who's an Irish-Canadian fisherman living in Newfoundland, who catches marine animals in order to pay the mortgage on his boat. Bumpo, that's the name of his boat. They couldn't call his boat Orca like they did in Jaws, after all, and eventually returned to Ireland. Nolan's crew is looking for a great white shark on behalf of a local aquarium, but the shark targets the aquarium's representative, Ken. An orca intervenes and kills the shark, saving Ken's life. Nolan switches targets to the much more valuable orca. He attempts to harpoon the creature, but accidentally strikes a female orca instead, leaving her with a fatal wound. The female orca tries to commit suicide at the pain. Nolan and his crew get the orca on board, where she subsequently miscarriages. The captain hoses the dead fetus overboard as the male orca, the female's mate, looks on and screams in anguish. The enraged male tries to ram Bumpo. Nolan's first mate, Novak, cuts the dead female loose to distract their attacker, but the orca jumps the boat and takes him with it under the ocean. The following day, the orca pushes his dead mate into the shore. Nolan agrees to kill the male, as the presence of an angry orca is causing the fish that are vital to the village's economy to migrate. The orca continues his vengeful by sinking several. Wait a minute. The orca continues his vengeful. I'm guessing I'm missing a word there. The orca continues its vengeance by sinking several fishing boats and rupturing underwater oil pipes that deprive the villagers of fuel. So yeah, you got a good old-fashioned revenge story here. As far as the cast goes, we have Richard Harris as Captain Nolan, Charlotte Rampling as Rachel Bedford, Will Sampson as Jacob Umalak, and Bo Derek as Annie. And Bo Derek's first feature film, I believe. This is her first film that she ever did in 1977 here. So yeah, let's just set up the premise. The cast for the 1977 film Orca the Killer Whale. This movie gets a lot of hate, especially when it came out as being nothing more than a Jaws ripoff. I don't really understand that, because to me this is not a Jaws ripoff. Now, there's no question that it was inspired by the success of Jaws, as it said in the opening premise here, and it definitely draws from the original Jaws. But to say that it's a ripoff, you obviously haven't watched the movie if you believe that, because this movie is very different than the original Jaws in a lot of ways. So let's just go ahead and get into it, starting with the things that I like about Orca the Killer Whale. And to be honest with you, there's quite a bit. I really enjoyed this movie for what it is. So I think you have to start with the performance of Richard Harris. I think he really makes this movie work, not just with his performance and his acting. Obviously, Richard Harris is a great actor, all the way up to playing Dumbledore his last couple years of life in the Harry Potter series. But I think the character that he plays here has a really good arc to him. Going from being a pompous and naive fisherman to a somewhat empathetic, um, knows what he has to do, sort of, I don't know what the word is. Inevitability. But I think Richard Harris really pulls it off, and he really brings life to this character uh, in a very effective way, and it's written in a very effective way. Unfortunately, that's the only character that's written in a very effective way, which we'll get into more of that when I get to my cons. But yeah, Richard Harris and that character of Captain Nolan, that really makes the movie. I think it really adds so much to the movie. Really like the revenge aspect of this movie. It's not like Jaws. Jaws was not a revenge movie. Well, until you got to the fourth one, but that's a different story. I actually think that Jaws the Revenge is more of a ripoff of this movie. That this movie's a ripoff of Jaws. But anyway, Jaws was, they even say it in the movie, you know, all this fish does, all Jaws does, is eat and swim and make little fish and make other sharks, and that's all. It's a mindless animal, basically. Well, it's very different than the whale, because the orca, the killer whale here, and orcas in general, they're very much on the same level as humans in a lot of ways. They have a higher level of intelligence. The way they communicate with each other and other packs of whales definitely makes a distinction from Jaws or great white sharks. And so I think this movie brings a lot more to the table with those with those differences there. The way it uses, like I said, whales' communication and the highly intelligent traits to seek revenge on somebody that, right or wrong, whether that person did it intentionally or not, the whale doesn't really care about that. I just found it to be very interesting and engaging throughout the movie. This sort of through line of revenge of an orca, the killer orca whale, on a human who does something terrible that doesn't mean to. It really doesn't matter. So the whole build up to the ending showdown between Nolan and Orca, which the whole movie, of course, builds up to that right from the first act, and it just builds and builds and becomes more inevitable and fascinating on how these two are going to have to. They're going to have a duel to the death, basically. And that was another thing that really had me engaged in the movie. And also how the townspeople and the town overall plays into it, because Orca's very smart. It knows that obviously I was going to say it's a fish. I know it's not a fish. It's a mammal, but it's a mammal that survives in the water. And obviously it knows it can't, unlike Jaws, who waits for people to come out in the water. This whale knows it has to go and get the people, force them to come out into the water and face them. Because it can't get out of the water. So, I mean, Nolan could just drive away if he wanted to. But, of course, he can't because the townspeople aren't going to let him, because the whale has made it clear that he's going to wreak havoc on this town, this coastal town. By knocking over houses, by drying up their oil supply, as it says, causing explosions. I mean, he basically cuts off the economy to this village, this fishing village town. And so in turn, the townspeople, they basically, in a lot of ways, force Nolan to go out and confront this whale and to do what's right by him. And I found that all very interesting, because you can't really say, when you're watching a movie like this, you can't really say, well, why doesn't he just drive away? The whale can't follow him on the road. No, but the townspeople can make it so they don't let him leave, and that's what they do. Because they're ultimately going to be the ones that have to pay for his sins, as Orca sees it. So all of that just really worked well for me, and I really loved it, to be honest with you. I also think the look of Orca and the other whales in this movie is very effective. Also, the effects surrounding them for the time that it was made, I think, are quite good and convincing for the time. There's some great camera work, some great underwater shots, but also overwater shots where you see the whale swimming up and you can see the outline of the whale. Just a lot of great filming, a lot of great camera work. I also really like the setting of this small coastal town. Not exactly like Amityville from Jaws, but it's obviously it borrows from that. But it's a town and townspeople that kind of have their own distinct way about them. It's very much not a carbon copy of Amityville at all, which was, of course, a tourist town. This isn't a tourist town; it's a fishing economy town. It relies on fishing and other aspects of that. So that was a nice change up. And then I also think the score and the music in this movie is very effective. Again, definitely borrowing from the Jaws theme, but it doesn't completely rip it off. But there are little beats within the score that are obviously uh, taken from Jaws, if you will. But I think it has a pretty effective and unique score all its own in this movie as well. But yeah, I really enjoyed Orca the Killer Whale. Those are my pros for it. As far as cons go, obviously it's not an original. It does take from, I'm not going to say it rips off because I don't believe it does, but it does, definitely borrows from the success of Jaws with, like I said, parts of the score, certain shots underwater, and other shots in the movie that are taken from Jaws or copied, if you want to say, from Jaws. You know, the fin that Orca has coming out of the water is very much from Jaws. And then having this coastal town setting. All of those things you can say are have risen from the success of Jaws. I'm not going to deny that, but so yeah, so I can't give it a 10 out of 10 because of originality. It's definitely um it definitely took from Jaws. Let's not get it wrong here. I will say I wanted a bit more from the confrontation at the end between Nolan and Orca. We get a pretty decent final confrontation, but it kind of happens quick when it ends. I'm not going to tell you exactly what happens if you haven't seen the movie, even though it's older than I am, so I should be able to tell you. But the big confrontation that happens at the end, the lead up to it is better, in my opinion, than the actual confrontation. And to me, that's kind of what separates Jaws from this movie yet. Even though I do believe this is one of the better non-original Jaws movies that came out after it, as far as like an aquatic killer movie. It's in the top 5 of those movies outside of Jaws from 1975. The reason that it's not on the same level, in my opinion, is because the ultimate battle and confrontation is kind of, it doesn't live up to the build up to it. Like Jaws has both. Jaws has the build up and the confrontation. This movie has half of it. It has the build up and it does it very well. But I wanted a bit more at the end. There's definitely some questionable logic with what the Orca can do. Like, how does the Orca know to go after these oil pipes and cause the explosions in town? Like, I realize that whales are smarter than sharks, but I mean, the notion that he knows what's in these pipes and that it's going to cause explosions on his behalf and cut off the supply line to the town. I mean, I don't know about that. That made me question. And I also don't think this movie's just not as suspenseful or thrilling as similar movies, namely Jaws. Well, I was engaged with it. I was never scared or like on the edge of my seat with it. I was more sort of engaged in the story and this character of Nolan. But I think they could have done more to sort of build up some tension and suspense and thrills in the movie, which, again, I won't mention it again, but a movie that came out 2 years before this did. And then my final, excuse me, my final con has to do with the other characters aside from Nolan. Now, you got a pretty good cast in this movie with Charlotte Rampling and Will Sampson and even Bo Derek, even though it was their first movie, and some others. Who is the Carradine that's in this movie? Is it Richard Carradine? No, not Richard. Ronald Carradine? The one that was in Revenge of the Nerds. I forget. So you got a good cast here, but I don't feel like the other characters were really ever given that much to do. Charlotte Rampling, well, she's a great actress. I felt like her character of Rachel Bedford at the beginning, she's sort of the exposition character that is all knowledgeable about marine life and especially orcas and whales. And she's trying to tell Nolan, who's kind of ignorant at the beginning about what he's doing and the repercussions of it. But then as the movie goes on, after he's done it, she kind of is on his side more and looking out for him. And I understand that there's supposed to be a sort of like hidden love story or she's falling for him kind of thing. I don't know. None of that really worked for me, to be honest with you. So I don't think Charlotte Rampling was the problem. I just don't think her character or the other characters were written all that well. Aside from Captain Nolan, played by Richard Harris, I just found the other characters to be sort of bland, like so many other shark and aquatic horror movies. So that's my other con. But overall, guys, for what it is, I think this is a pretty damn good movie, and I'm really glad to have it on Blu-ray. A little disappointed that Scream Factory didn't put any, and I repeat, any special features other than, well, it does have audio commentary with a film historian in the theatrical trailer. Big whoop. But I mean, I thought it would have been nice to have a little bit more than that. I expect more from Scream Factory, but overall, I'm glad to have it on Blu-ray. I'm glad to have the movie. I think Orca the Killer Whale is an effective and better than not aquatic horror movie about a killer animal in the water. So I'm going to give Orca the Killer Whale a 7.5 out of 10. 7.5 for Orca the Killer Whale from 1977. Go ahead and comment down below your guys' thoughts on this movie if you've seen it before, what you think of it. Comment down below. Please like this video, hit the little notification bell, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. It'll really help me out going forward in the future content on my channel. But with all that being said, I would recommend checking out this movie. And basically anything that's higher than a 6 or a 7 for me is a recommendation, even if I don't say it in my videos. But with that being said, thank you for watching. I hope you're enjoying this review series. And as always, stay scared. Bye.